Parenting's hard, you don't know what to do. You're blaming your kids, but it's probably you. You love your kids and that you can trust. Just remember your kids don't suck.
Welcome to Your Kids Don't Suck, cultivating closeness with your children through non-coercive conscious parenting. We're your hosts, Kara Tedstone and Rathia Lee. Let's dive in and grow together.
Welcome to episode 4 of Your Kids Don't Suck. We're so happy you've stayed with us, that you're learning with us, that you're growing with us. We're having an amazing experience. It's so rich. It's so fulfilling. It's so enlivening. It's so challenging. We just can't get enough of it. We have so many different ideas for what we want to share. And so today, the topic is Your Kids Don't Suck, the trauma and trigger episode. So exploring trauma and triggers and how they're connected and how it relates to parenting, and especially in a non-authoritarian, conscious way. Kara and I are going to tell a little bit about our traumas and how we've healed from them and also continue to heal from them, and the hard parts. And then also how that's affected us as parents, meeting our child where they're at, dealing with our emotions, and definitely dealing with triggers. Triggers are the key point in parenting that differentiates a reactive parent and a conscious parent, because, that's when we start passing down our hurts, our wounds, is when we get so triggered that we can't help but do what was done to us. And it's hard for everybody. So this is how we've done it. And so I'm going to start. I want to give a little content warning that I'm just going to refer to some heavy trauma. I'm not going to talk about anything graphic, but I am going to mention childhood sexual abuse because that's a big part of my story. So if that's hard for you, just to do what you need to ground yourself, or skip this part, or hold yourself in some way. And I think it's important for you to know, who are your hosts and what have they been through? Why do they get to tell you things? Where are they coming from? So for me, it's always really hard for me to talk about my childhood. I can barely do it. I swear I can barely do it because it's so extreme that it's I always feel like I'm going to shock and hurt people. So I have all my close friends. I have my family of choice, and we're all trauma survivors, and we all refer to our trauma. And I have my partner who's also a trauma survivor. And so I have found my arenas. I have all my clients who are trauma survivors. So there are worlds and places where what I talk about makes sense, but just in the general public, even to say I'm an incest survivor is just so provocative. It's so out of the box. I'm not even supposed to say that. I'm not even supposed to say I'm an incest survivor, but I am. And it's still sad 30 years later of doing hardcore therapy work on that. It's still so sad. I could just cry right now, even though I'm so used to it. I'm so used to my story. But I will say, I left home when I was 16. I can say that I fled. I really fled my home. I barely made it out. It was a cult environment, and I had been sexually abused through my whole childhood. And I honestly cannot tell you how I made it out. I don't know. I really don't know. But I left home when I was 16. I went to go live with a friend and her mom. I did finish going to school. I went to a performing arts high school in Philadelphia. I danced a lot. I was really manically engaged with dance. And that really kept me alive my whole life. I just love it. I still love it. And when I was 16, I started to train myself to cry, because I had never cried my whole life that I could remember. And I started to train myself to turn on music and cry. And I started waking up my internal life. And then when I was 24, someone told me about being abused by my father, and I started having flashbacks, and I started the long journey of recovering repressed memories, which came in like explosions into my psyche and forced me to have to cut off contact with my family of origin and really never go back. So then, just to fast forward and not tell you everything, I was in like, it's been 30 years. It's been 30 years since I really started intensive therapy. And I have many different therapists, but I also had a zillion other tools. I was in 12-step groups. I was an artist. I journaled. I did authentic movement, which is a movement practice. I did all kinds of meditation. I mean, everything you could think of. I was just like trying to function by healing as fast as I could. And that led to being trained in something called inner bonding, which is parts work. It's working with the inner parts, the inner kid parts and the inner adult and the guidance piece, working with spirit, like working with spiritual guides. That was part of the training that I had in this work called inner bonding. And so I did that for my own healing, but then I also started working with clients. So my whole life became healing my trauma, helping people heal their trauma, and doing inner child work. And that meant like rescuing parts of myself from all kinds of memories and experiences that seemed impossible, and growing a loving adult, which takes a lot of time when you have been so crushed as a kid. It just takes so much work, so much practice, so much failing, so much despair, so much gathering of resources and community and friends. And luckily I'm an extrovert, so I just like threw myself into relationships in a good way. I have amazing friends, long-term friends that I've had now for like 25, 30 years that are just my family, and I love them and I love their children, and they hold me and I hold them. And co-counseling. I'm a big co-counselor. That's a peer-to-peer counseling practice. And anyway, I've worked really hard to make sure that when I had my child at 42 years old, that I would not pass down even an inch of that trauma. I was not going to have a kid unless I did that. And then I was just making sure, as hard as I could, that I would never, ever, ever hurt my child in any capacity like I was hurt. And the good news is I haven't. But I realized when she was 5 that if I continued to coerce, control, punish, withdraw my love, judge her, that I was going to create a separation that did remind me of me and my mother. And that's when my whole life turned around. I decided I'm going to do something really radical, and I'm going to treat her like a full equal. And I'm going to start to take her opinions and her needs and her desires as serious as mine and collaborate with her. And so that's how we got here to this podcast, and to now my life's work is helping parents really look at, like, if you continue to treat your child like less than equal to you, what is going to happen with that relationship? And it's bad news.
Wow. Thank you so much for telling, your story, because some of that I did not know. And a lot of what I was thinking about when you were talking was, you must really get it when you hear parents say, like, I feel like I can't do non-coercion because I get so triggered. Or I just really want to be a gentle parent, but I have so much stuff. You must really get what they mean when they say that.
I do, except that for some reason, for as much work as I did, I've never wanted in my life ever to hit my kid. I guess that's not totally true. I have had moments. Also, she used to hit me, and boy, did I want to hit her back, like right when she would hit me.
Well, that visceral, like that, yeah, just that reaction, that very human response is it's not something you can just shove away and pretend, and just not have.
I do get that. I
guess what I'm saying is you've actually experienced such a hell, like a true hell.
Yeah.
That when people tell you about their hell, obviously as a trauma therapist yourself, but like at the human level, you get that. And when these parents are speaking with you about their challenges, I feel like you must get that in a way that is so human.
Yeah, I do get it. And I have so much love and respect for any person, either a parent or not, who wants to look at themselves, because my parents never looked at themselves. Or so any person or human that's like, God, I really want to face this. I'm just like, I love you. I'm here for this. My whole life is dedicated to people like that.
Yeah. But it makes you a really easy person to talk to, because when I was telling you all about my own experiences and how I find myself getting triggered because of the stuff that's old, like you really get it. And that's what probably brings us all to you. You're like in the vulnerable, like in your vulnerability and in your honesty and in your humanity, you really freaking get what it means to look at yourself in the mirror and show up for your kid and try and try and try and repair and repair and repair. Like, you're not somebody who's on a pedestal being like, here, follow my program. Here's my formula. I promise you this. If you do this, you'll get this. It's like, we talked about the promises, and that's all very true. We can assure you some things, but you actually get what it means to do the hard work. And that's what makes you such a relatable and actually helpful person to learn from.
Well, thank you. And yes, and it's ongoing, man. I mean, I woke up, what was it this morning? I led my parent support group and I woke up in a total backlash. Like, you're not allowed to be so visible. You're not allowed to be seen. It's dangerous. I have so much I have to do to continue to be me every single day. It's so much fucking work for me. I'm still having flashbacks. I still have flashbacks all the time. I still get new information about how bad it was. Another corner, another aspect. And there's still huge chunks of it I can't handle at all. I cannot handle. I've just been dealing with my mom material for the last 2 years after being so avoidant of it. Yeah, I kind of worked on like my evil dad for like years and years and years and years. And I've had to like, yeah. So like, and then I have to work on my siblings, losing my siblings. Well, yeah, it's just like endless. So even though that is true, I feel like I wish it gets a point where I could just say, and then I coasted.
And then I was healed.
Yeah, and then it was easy. It's never easy. But I do get a lot of like, I do have a lot of love and I do have a lot of rewards of my hard work. Like my closeness with my daughter is like this huge, victorious, like generation curse breaker. Like, holy fuck, like I fucking did it. They never got their hands on her. They never got to see her. They'll never meet her. They'll fucking die and they'll never meet my kid. And that's like the best thing I ever did. Was that too intense, what I just said?
No, I think that that's just deserves like a pause and a moment of recognition for that, because like I think all of us on TikTok who are Googling the shit out of, and we find you and we're looking at parenting stuff, like most of us are generational cycle breakers. But that also brings me to this question that I have too, is like when people don't relate to that intensity of trauma. Like, I know in my circles, I don't know a lot of folks who have dealt with intense trauma. I mean, I know everybody's has their shit, but in terms of like my connections in my intimate circles, social relationships, I feel like I have been through the most. And I do wonder if people will listen to this and our stories and think, well, I haven't had that happen to me. I don't think I'm going to mess up my kid because I don't really lose my shit very often. And I'm cool. And, I've got it all figured out in terms of emotional regulation. Like, well, my life's pretty good, or I haven't been through that stuff. So I feel like I'm okay. And I don't need to do that work. I wonder if people will feel like that.
Kara, I think it's more that people don't recognize the traumas that they've lived through. I think, when you say you've been through the most, that's probably not true. You probably are just around people who don't know they have trauma. That's more common than anything. No one had perfect parents. We live in an absolutely traumatic world. Just fucking being a kid turning on the television is trauma. We live in a racist, white supremacist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic trauma world. It's a trauma vortex. School is traumatic. Middle school is traumatic. Peer abuse is traumatic. Puberty is traumatic for some people. Are you kidding? Everyone has some kind of trauma. Neglect Neglect is the trauma that no one ever recognizes. Like, well, my parents are pretty nice. We never talked about our feelings. My mother never hugged me, but it was fine. Or I was hit and that was fine. Or I was punished and that was fine. All of that normalizing of abuse and coercion.
Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted you to get at, because what I guess I'm saying is when people tell me, well, it's not that deep and I haven't really been through all that much, like I have a great relationship with my parents, for example, or it's pretty good, or, it's run of the mill, it's normal. So I just think that, I don't really have to make that connection between trauma and how it relates to parenting, because, in their opinion, they're saying like, I haven't been traumatized. I had a good upbringing. I had a great childhood, things like that. And
but
I
you don't
think,
even have to call it trauma. You could
yeah,
just say, let's just watch someone parent and it says it all. They don't even have to,
exactly.
you can just see it right there in real time.
That's it. It goes back to our what's wrong with coercion conversation. What I'm also thinking about is the folks who are like not on board with this idea that actually trauma are our stories, the way that we've normalized our own experiences and our enmeshment with our parents. That relates to all parenting, not just Kara Mathias, but all parenting. Everybody, like you said, has been through shit. Everybody should look at themselves in the mirror to figure out how that's coming into their parenting. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is our trauma and sharing our stories. And like, we can, invite people into our experiences and be vulnerable with everybody. I want to do that. But I also want to make the point that if you haven't been through that, you've still been through something, and it's worth looking into.
Yeah, I posted this morning, I posted a new video on TikTok, and it was a video of me enacting a scene I saw in a restaurant a couple weeks ago of this father with his daughter. At least it appeared like a father and a daughter. I don't know if it was. I don't know if that's their right gender identities, but that's what it appeared. She was crying and he was holding food, and he kept saying, "Stop whining. Stop whining. I don't like your whining. You cannot have a bite until you stop whining." And
How old was the kid?
I don't know, maybe she was 3, 4. For some reason he was feeding her, but he wouldn't give her a bite until she stopped whining. And I kept passing by so I could watch it. So I'm like, oh, I really want to see how this is. She kept saying, "I can't stop whining." He would say, "You need to stop whining." She'd be like, "I can't stop whining." And then he kept saying, "I do not like it when you whine." And then finally he fed her a bite, and she goes, "See, you don't have to whine to get what you want. You can just say, 'I want a bite.' You don't have to whine." It was so excruciating for me. And it's like, that's just normal for most people. Like, most people watching that would be like, well, that seems pretty normal. Most parents are like that. But that's enough shaming and reactivity that someone should look like. That dad should look at his process. He should look at why that's so triggering for him that his daughter whines. That's enough. He doesn't even have to identify some massive wounded, child. It's just like, that's enough behavior, and that's nothing, that's really light. But like,
these stories come up all the time. It's so true. I have one from yesterday. Grocery store. A man came up to me. He had a daughter in his cart that was similar age to my daughter. And my daughter's 16 months. And so she was just sitting in the cart. She was eating a bunch of blueberries. That's how she was sitting in the cart, because she was snacking. He commented on my daughter's behavior. He said, "How do you get your kid to sit so still? Look at this well-behaved kid," and talking to his kid and saying that. And I thought that was the funniest thing ever, because Rathia knows that I voice note her all the time, being like, my kid in the grocery store is a nightmare for me, because I have to do the blueberries and the oranges and the talking and the engagement. But it's really just, it's normal toddler behavior at the end of the day, developmentally normal. Why would she want to sit in a cart for an hour while I get food? Like, why would she want to do that? That's not biologically appropriate for her to be doing. So this man commented on that, and I found that so hilarious, because it's never me with the quote unquote well-behaved kid in any indoor environment. Like, that's just not her. So anyways, but his kid was climbing in from the cart seat to the back of the cart, and in and out and in and out. And he was really stressed, but he was making a joke, and he was alone. So poor guy. I felt for him, because he didn't know really kind of what to do. And then I ended up, we went on our way, and I just laughed, and I said, like, "Oh, I'm just talking to her. I can't even answer your question. I'm so exhausted. I can't even think, because I've got the blueberries, and I've got the pouch, and I've got the songs and the dances, and that's what I was doing to keep her engaged." Right. And then we just laughed and he went on. And then I left actually when I was in the line because Aaliyah started kind of like, I think she wanted to like climb on the conveyor belt. And I was like, well, we'll just go to the car and wait for him. And so we left. And my husband came and he told me, he said, you know, that guy that was talking to, I saw him and his daughter was losing it because he wouldn't let her out of the cart. She kept trying to climb into his arms as he was putting groceries. And I guess he felt like he couldn't do both at once. And so he was forcing her back in. Sanjay tells me.
Oh,
He's like, he was forcing her back in and he just kept kind of jamming her in there and putting her in there and pushing her in there. And that's true. That's another example of that father would benefit, I think, from looking at it, not from a behaviorist lens, but from a completely different lens, like a self-reflection lens on what happened in the store. How did I respond? Why was I so frustrated that then I ended up, you know, physically forcing her in? Was there another way? What was going on for me in that moment? Because again, that was not about the child's behavior. Of course, she wanted to climb out, right?
But that is what makes a conscious parent. When we say it, non-coercive conscious, a conscious parent turns the focus back to themselves and gets curious and has an inquiry process. That is what makes a parent a conscious parent. They're not perfect. They fuck it up over and over again, but they keep asking the question, what is it hitting in me? What's it reminding me of? What happened to me when I was a kid and I tried to blah, 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 blah? How am I acting like my parent? You know, all of that. That's the difference between trauma just getting passed down and, like, you know, being worked on. And even if it's messy, just having even some consciousness makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. That's really what I wanted to comment on today. It was just about this idea that like that man in the grocery store might not have been through like big capital T trauma, but that man still would benefit from having a self-reflection moment. And instead of looking at it from like, let me try to condition my kid in this behaviorist lens that I just think is the norm. Even in the content that we look at on Instagram today, I don't know if you're seeing it, but I'm seeing it all the time. It's conditioning. It's all about conditioning. Do it enough times to your kid, whether it's a reinforcement of a behavior or a consequence of a behavior, like ignoring things you don't want to see, things like that. All of these behaviorist strategies are still being shared on the main parenting accounts that I at least see on my socials.
Those are so hard for me that I don't follow people like that. I can't stand it.
See, I follow it because I want to know what people are getting. Like I want to know what people are getting so that I can comment on it, you know? I think people would just benefit from like throwing out behaviorism because it's just we're not trying to train dogs here. We're trying to grow people. And conditioning as a concept and behaviorism as a concept, there's so much wrong with it because it's actually all centers out from the idea of control, that there is a controller and a controllee, and behaviorism it is traumatizing really at the end of the day.
But here's the key. If you control your child all day, you do not have to look at your own pain. Anytime your kid does something that's upsetting to you, you can just do something to make them do it differently. Even if you spend all your time in a power struggle with your child, you can still keep your focus outside of yourself. Then it's, of course, judging your kid because your kid isn't an extrovert enough, or isn't clean enough, or too scattered, or doesn't have good attention, or picks their nails, or you can always find things that are wrong with your children that are so disappointing. And just keep your focus on trying to change that. And also like withdrawing your love when you don't like things about them. And that's horrible. It's like a form of emotional torment for children who have to make themselves what you want in order to get the attachment that they need and survive.
Yeah. And that the ways that they do that are not always visible to us.
The children, the way the children do it?
Yeah, the way that the children will internalize what we're doing to them and then change their behaviors and act in ways that they are processing as going to be beneficial to the attachment. We don't always recognize that's what they're doing. We might even internalize that as, again, more bad behavior or really good behavior, but their goal is always to remain safe in the relationship because that's survival for them.
Well, what's interesting is they have to remain safe in the relationship, but they also have to try to maintain autonomy. And it's like a deep, complex dance. So Kara, do you want to take a little time and just talk about anything related to your trauma that you think is relevant and tell your story a little bit?
Yeah, I lost my brother in 2019, and he was my only sibling and my very best friend. And I think for me to come to a non-coercive lens and be able to really identify what that is and why I want that is because my brother treated me that way. Like he was like 10 years older than me. So my brother Russell was 10 years older than me. And he was never a parent figure, but we were always very, very close. When I was born, he was totally in love with me and treated me like gold. And that lasted our entire relationship. And he died when I was 25, suddenly and very, very traumatically. And that's where I got so much of my sense of self, I think, and the affirmation that I was good the way that I was, and that I didn't have to change, and that I was just straight up awesome and not needing to like mold, because I had Russell who kept affirming that in me without needing to control my behavior because he was just my brother. So I losing Russell was just like losing so much of my self-esteem, so much of my identity and sense of worth. It's just really wrapped up in my parenting, because you can't get that from parents who behave in authoritative ways. You just can't. It's not possible. So for me to realize all of this through therapy and doing my own healing and looking at myself and the ways that I act and what my triggers are, really it's all linked to what I had and what I don't have anymore, and what that means for me and how I engage in my life now. And I just feel like it's easy for me to see what it's like to have a non-coercive person in your life from birth. And it's also easy for me to see what it's like when you lose that. And I don't want my daughter to be raised without that. Like not just from the idea that like I reject the idea of authority in parenting, but because that experience of being loved unconditionally like that without control in a relationship is something that like you can't even explain, like how deep and meaningful that is. So that's my trauma, is having lost that, and not having my brother here to hear me talk about him like this. I'm trying really hard not to cry. Yeah. It's painful.
Yeah, I can really feel the rupture. So intense. Yeah.
It's it's like going through an identity crisis, and feeling like you're not whole because you don't have that person telling you that you are. So for me, parenting my daughter in that way and bringing her up to my adult perspective of equality and deep meaning, and rejecting the idea that I am the sage, all-knowing, teaching person that needs to mold her. Like I just channel this idea that I got from my brother in the relationship I had with him, that was just like, you are just great, just the way you are. That's really all there is to it.
I think it's worth noting that your parents did not do that. So that's what makes Russell all the more amazing, is that usually we hope the parent would do it, but you had a brother.
Which, yeah. Well, and it's like, it's just one of those things that has to be said, that it like, I just don't think that my parents and that generation of parenting, like that just wasn't even on the agenda. It just wasn't even on the radar. Like building my self-esteem in that way was not known to them. It just wasn't. It was not known to them. It was about behavior. Essentially, it was about raising your kid to be like a productive member of society.
Right.
And that was the importance, not like having a peer type relationship or like a really like unconditionally loving relationship. It was like, let's make sure our kids get with the program.
Yeah, but Kara, that's still how society is. That's still, I mean, I know you're saying it's generational, and yes, there's new thinking now, but that is still mostly how people think about parenting.
It is. And
schools.
Schools are all like that. I mean, all schools are like that.
Yeah, because making our kids functional is it's also because parents feel so engulfed by their children. They feel so overwhelmed and invaded by their children's needs that they need to see very early on that their child is going to become independent and get the fuck away from them. You know what I mean? Like, so much of parenting is about, oh no, I have to make my kid functional. Otherwise, they're going to still be an amoeba that is like attached to me. And that's horrifying.
Yeah.
We're going to transition into giving some input about how to start looking at your own trauma. What are a couple of tools or lenses you can look through to start to become a conscious parent if you're not already, or you just want more information? So we're just going to head in that direction for the last quarter of this.
We wanted to shift into, in this part of the episode, what can you do instead, right? If you're used to following a behaviorist approach whereby you're using punishments, rewards, you're using ignoring, like you're just trying to focus on the behaviors all the time and fix your kid, then what do you do instead? And Rathia came up with a really cool acronym that we'll share with you, but it came from, I imagine, probably your work with trauma in general, right, Rathia? Like, this is something that you would use for when you're feeling triggered, and this is like a step-by-step strategy, right?
Well, it's abridged. I made it I tried to make it shorter and simpler than sort of if I was going to do a full process with somebody, right? So I came up with PERK, which I can go through what that is, but it's like simplified. Obviously, if you want your lifestyle to be about exploring your triggers, you're going to need support, all kinds of support, and all kinds of ways to do it. This is just something to start thinking about as like a framework. So, like, first is pause. Pause is like the most powerful word in terms of parenting. I can't think of a more powerful word than pause. Pause and back up. So much of me coming out of coercion has been pausing. And even still, I'm biting my tongue a lot. I'm telling myself, shh, don't talk, be quiet, just listen, a lot. I'm still doing that even after, how long has it been? 7 years of this work with her. Yeah, I want to fix it all the time. And the other night I said something I really regretted. We were talking about body image, and I just said something that was really not good and was wounded, and I regretted it. And then I had to like sit with myself. I'm so scared I'm gonna give my kid a complex. I really just need to listen. And then sometimes she'll ask me, or sometimes I'm clear what I need to say. But if you're unclear, you're reactive or you're triggered, you need to pause and back up. Then emotion, you sit with your emotion. It's great to know like the 5 main emotions, which is mad, sad, scared, ashamed, and happy. Happy is also a feeling. So you pause and then you try to see, what am I feeling? Am I mad? Am I scared? Am I sad? And usually if it's very charged, it's very hard to take it off your kid and put it on you. And that's why it's so important for you to figure out what you're feeling. I was just doing a live with a creator on TikTok that I love, and she was saying that sometimes she's just sitting there sweating in her feelings, and in order to not act out on her kid, she has to sit there and just like sweat because she has all this violence in her background, and so she wants to have like a really strong violent reaction, so she has to sit there, almost hold herself down and sweat. And for me, I have a partner, so I can actually, it's often, if he's there, leave the room. And actually my daughter's old enough now that I can say, honey, I'm going downstairs, I have to go, I'll be back, if I'm getting triggered. Then R is remember, because all your triggers are coming from the past, man. They come from something. They don't come from nothing. Last night in my parent support group, people were talking about cleaning and picking up and how triggering that is for everybody. So what you have to stop and remember, what happened to me when I didn't pick up my stuff, when I didn't put my dishes on the sink, when I didn't do my dishes, when I left a mess, what happened to me? And you have to get to the point where you actually empathize with the child, not the adult, the child in the story. Remember means remember yourself as a child, not remember your parent who was judging you and now do the same thing. It's like you have to get inside what it truly felt like for you as the child. And then the last part is comfort. So if you have a memory of being yelled at, you want to go into the memory and get your kid and hold that little kid and say, that was not your fault. You did the best you could. They were, in their own stuff. That was about them. That was not about you. You're a wonderful child. You're a wonderful person. You want to like really go back in time and comfort the child that you were. Now, this is a deep study. It's a hard thing to do. It takes time. You can do it through journaling and drawing. You can do it in your mind. You can visualize it. You can hold a stuffed animal. I know it sounds nuts, but it really helps. Sometimes it really helps to hold your actual child and imagine yourself as a child. Like your kid is you and you're holding yourself as a kid. I used to do that with my daughter a lot. That would really choke me out. And then once you've comforted yourself and you're not projecting the whole story onto your child, you can actually comfort your real child. That's the thing. I screwed up. I said something wounded with my child the other day about body image, and I'm going to go back and repair it. I'm waiting to get through my triggers with it because I'm still triggered about it. And then I'm going to go back and say, you know what? I said this thing to you and I didn't feel really great about it. I wish I'd said this. And I didn't mean that. What did you think when I said that? And I can go back and repair with her. You can always go back and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I reacted. I'm sorry I did this or that,
Mm-hmm.
So that's the last step, is comfort your child.
And the acronym is PERC, PERC. It's pause, emotions, remember, and comfort. The first step, though, is identifying and really accepting that we're triggered. Like identifying when and accepting that it's true. That's hard sometimes for people. Like, no, I'm not triggered. You're just pissing me off. I'm not triggered. You just won't get in the goddamn car,
Yeah.
Like, no, you're triggered, though.
Which is why I have given my daughter the words to say, Mom, are you triggered? She asks me that a lot. Mom, are you triggered? Mom, you seem triggered. She'll say, Mom, you seem triggered. She says it to my partner too. Sometimes she said to both of us. She goes, you two are just so triggered right now.
Well, no, but it's like, that's so really helpful because I'm doing that sometimes with my husband. If he's tense and I'm noticing like a disconnect between us, I'll point out that to him and I'll say, like, I think maybe there's something going on. Something's up. If our kids can point that out to us, that's really actually helpful. We have to be very conscious, though, already to accept that and allow that to be helpful instead of being hurtful, which I think most parents, like not conscious parents who are learning about this or maybe just like don't know about it at all, would maybe find that to be presumptuous or insulting, right? That like if our kids point out, hey, you're triggered or you're being an asshole or you're being a dick, right? Parents are going to take that a lot of the time as, wow, you're the dick.
Yeah.
You can't assume about me, this defensiveness, this reactivity.
Yeah.
We have to really be open to the fact that we are triggered and we do get triggered and it's okay to be triggered.
Right. And just as we have a reason for being triggered, our kids have a reason for being triggered.
Exactly. Like, I guess just like normalizing the fact that like being triggered is a part of being human.
Yes.
To want to have like a serenity about you all the time. It reminds you of the Seinfeld episode, Serenity Now, right? Like, I don't know if you watch Seinfeld, but anyways.
I love Seinfeld, but
right.
I don't know that.
George's dad is like Serenity Now, and it's just all about like channeling calm. But the humor of the episode is that he's the most irrational, angry man on the planet, right? But he's always like, Serenity Now. And it's like a waste of his time. Like, that's the joke. Because it is trying to channel calm and saying that like, no, I'm good. I don't get triggered. My kid's the problem. It's about them. It's about them. It's just a waste of everybody's time. Like, let's normalize being triggered and let's normalize the reality that is the constant swinging pendulum of human emotions.
Well, so the non-coercive path creates a culture of mutuality. That's the whole point, is it creates a culture in your home that everyone's equal, everyone has problems, everyone has issues, everyone's challenged. And so no one's better than anyone else, and no one gets to say what someone else should be doing as much as possible. I know it's hard to believe when I say that. I imagine parents going, what are you talking about? You have to tell children what to do. That's like, well, you can guide your child while treating them like a whole autonomous human being.
And just allowing your own feelings to be is such a big part of that.
Their feelings and your feelings.
Yes, because the thing is if we can't allow our own feelings, how the fuck are we supposed to allow our kids?
Right. So we have to start by allowing our own feelings.
We do. That's where PERC comes in.
thank you for being present to this very deep episode where we just really shared some deep emotional material. And I hope it models for you that whatever you've been through really matters. And you deserve to be heard in that place. You deserve to be seen in that place. Whatever you live through, it matters.
This has been Your Kids Don't Suck. You can find me, Kara Tedstone, at www.karatedstonetherapy.com and on Instagram at Kara Tedstone Therapy. On my website, you'll find links to recommended readings and a link to my Reparenting with Mindfulness workbook, available now on Amazon.
You can find me, Rathia Lee, at www.rathia.com. That's RYTHEA.com. There you'll find published books, articles, and music, and parenting videos. Also, I'm on TikTok at Rathia Lee, on Instagram at Rathia Lee. You can book parent mentoring sessions with me through my website. And also I have an Advice from a Loving Bitch YouTube show that helps people heal self-hatred, and that's rathia.com/advice. It is important and essential to put our voices, Rathia and Kara, in a context. We are two white, cisgendered, straight, middle-class women living with financial and societal privilege. Because of this, our perspectives are limited and do not reflect the realities of all of our listeners. This podcast will feature guests with expertise around conscious parenting who differ in race, class, abilities, sexual orientation, and histories from us, to broaden the conversation and reflect the lives of as many people as possible. 25% of the proceeds of this podcast will go to creators of color who have been mentors and influences on our work and in our growth as parents.
If you like our show, please subscribe and stay tuned for more conscious parenting advice and insights. And check out our link tree at linktr.ee/yourkidsdon'tsuck to donate and connect with us.